So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Diana. She's a student here at Flinders, or she's just finished her degree. She's going to be taking us through most of the webinar. She's very good at drawing. We've seen some of her art. It's really cool. Like I said, if you've got any questions, any comments, any technical difficulties, please send them through to the chat. And this is also part 1 of 2. So we're going to be running the second webinar next Monday. If you're watching the recorded version of this, it's going to be Monday the 25th of May. If you've got any questions, please send them to stem@flinders.edu.au. So, Diana, I might hand over to you.
Thank you. So hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into today's session. So Introduction to Observational Drawing, Session 1. So I'm Deanna, as Ellen said, and yep, I hope you enjoy this session. There we go. So observational drawing can also be known as nature illustration or science illustration, where professional artists carefully observe the natural world around them and spend time illustrating it. So you can consider things like cave paintings, Renaissance thinkers, and now modern illustrators. So you may have heard
there we go.
You may have heard of the names of these highly accomplished nature illustrators. If you haven't, I would definitely encourage you to look some of these people up, like maybe Da Vinci, Linnaeus, Marion, Margaret Mee.
I've just read a book about Marion. It's very cool.
Yeah, they're really cool people. So yeah, if you do want to look them up, that is a good thing to do. So as a scientist, or more specifically as a biologist, observational drawing simply means to draw what you see so that it can help you describe and identify a species. But it's easier said than done, and I'm sure that it can be quite daunting for most beginners. And some people may ask why we even need drawings when we have photos. While photography is useful for collecting data faster, some people tend to forget that we usually use photos as additional notes and not as the whole note-taking process. So of course, some studies could not be done without photos, but observing the object in its natural 3D form can be more useful than seeing it in a 2D picture. There have been many documented cases where illustrators observed what scientists didn't, scientists missed, and this is because they have these strongly developed observational skills and visual skills. So basically what I'm trying to explain is that as a scientist, drawing helps you understand your object and not just replicate it, as you can see in these field notes.
It's because I'm typing in the chat. There you go.
Yeah. I'll just say next slide. So this form of drawing relies heavily on observation rather than imagination. So I will introduce you to some techniques which help scientists with their field drawings, and this first starts with mindful observation. So if you have an item, pick it up if you can and turn it around and look at it from all of its angles. Don't make any assumptions about it from what you have seen before in a similar object. Every leaf is different, every shell is different, every face is different, just like any human face is different. Yeah, so that's the comparison. And usually natural illustrators even count the number of feathers, spots, stripes, cracks, etc. to make their drawing as accurate as possible. So as you can see in that photo over there, the shell is drawn from all the different angles. So I've added a link where Sir David Attenborough talks to Bill Cooper, and he's Australia's greatest living scientific painter of birds. And it's quite an entertaining video. If you're interested, they discuss a bit more about how accurate the drawings actually need to be.
Just to drop in, I'm going to drop all of the links in the chat at the end of this session. And again, if you're watching the recorded version of this, they should be in the description of the video.
Yep. Next slide.
It should be working now.
So next is measuring the object you are drawing and thinking about size and proportions. So you can use bounding boxes which help you think about the positive and negative spaces in your drawing. So positive is your object and negative space is the area around it. So I've added a link again which explains these terms if you aren't sure of what they are. And as an example of how I drew the seashells, I measured the width and the length and then created a bounding box around my object to help me with the drawing. And there we go. In fieldwork, you must always add a scale bar to your drawing, and these can get very complicated very quick if your object is very big or if it's microscopic. But for the purpose of what we're doing right now, try to draw something which is the same size in real life as it is in your drawing. Basically, it's all about proportions, and if you're interested in studying biology or science further, I highly recommend you learning how to do scale bars, because it's in every single lab that we have. So yeah, you can have
Scaling is super important.
Yeah, it's very important. So you can have a look at that link. That's just a very easy link, but it can get way more complex than that too. And I've kind of explained it there with some ducks. So next we can talk about shapes, underlying structure, and accurate lines. Some objects are highly complex and it can be very hard to even know where to start. So we have to make something look 3D on a 2D piece of paper. So you would start by breaking down the object into simplified 3D shapes like cones, cups, cylinders, spheres, even circles, and this link is helpful as well if you aren't sure of how to do that. So once you have all of these down, then you begin refining your lines and kind of connecting the shapes together into your object outline. And it's very important to develop this structure before adding in any other detail. And you can add curves to your drawing and make it look 3D by varying line weight. So line weight is how lightly or heavily you press the pencil to the paper when you're drawing. And as you already know, pencils come in varying scales of darkness, so I would recommend HB or 2B types of pencils because they're easy to darken and lighten, and they're also easier to erase if you make a mistake.
HB and 2B are like the darker, softer pencils, yeah?
Yeah, so like 2B is darker than HB.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and there's like 4B, which like, and it gets all the way dark to like really dark, yeah, like black. So, and then this line weight is what is going to eventually give your drawing depth. So very rarely do you have time in fieldwork to work with shadows, and they can tend to look kind of messy if you don't have experience. But you can give the objects contour by making simple lines to show overlapping layers, textures, or other smaller details like stripes. And most importantly, while you are drawing, take lots of notes, maybe the shapes, textures, individual characteristics. Maybe some shells might have a hole or a crack in them, just like that one has in the slide over there. And this can help you later on when you're writing your report, or you're making a more fully rendered drawing, or just with your research in identifying the species. Okay, so now that I've explained on that, it's your turn to draw your own natural object sketch. So pick something that has an interesting shape but is not overly hard. So I made a list of the suggestions over there. And it would be best if you have the real object, but if you really can't find a single thing in your house, which I doubt so, but if you can't, you can have a look online and you can choose a picture to draw from. And then show some evidence of you thinking about the concepts of observational drawing that we covered today. Things like measurements, so include a bounding box or a scale bar, basic shapes and underlying structure, so accurate lining, so you don't need to add any shading. And most importantly is take lots of notes. If you can't draw it, then you maybe can explain it or research it further, and just for the correct terminology. As you saw on the previous slide, let me just go back to it.
There you go. Try again.
There we go. I separated the steps here, but usually when I'm drawing something for fieldwork, I combine these steps together at the same time when I'm drawing. However, as you practice and do your own drawing this week, at this point, I'm not looking for a completely finished drawing. More as a series of sketches where you're studying your object and thinking about and maybe just trying out the techniques that we talked about today. And you don't need to finish each sketch that you do, and you can do more drawings if you feel like it. So I think it mostly depends on everyone's level of drawing and what they feel comfortable with. And just some tips, so always use a pencil. As I said, you can erase if you make a mistake. And always refer to your object as you draw, so observe and don't make assumptions about what you're drawing from what you've seen previously. And just as a small note, please don't draw any flowers or leaves or add any colors to your work, because I will discuss them in our next session. And it doesn't matter what level of drawing you're at. I really believe that anyone can do this with enough practice, because I started out not being able to do it at all, and then I could do some of it. So I really look forward to seeing your drawings for next week, and I hope you'll enjoy taking the time to observe the natural world around you. And yeah, so I obviously covered a lot of information in the links, and I'm sure there's a lot more in the links provided as well. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Cool. Thank you very much, Diana. Like I said, any questions, please do drop them in the chat. We've got one. So Diana, how long did it take you to learn to draw like this?
Like the observation. Well, I have been drawing for most of my life, but I draw more creatively, and it's like what comes out of my mind. But taking the time to actually sit down and observe and do the stuff, maybe I started it at the beginning of university, so now I've got around 3 or 4 years, but I kind of wish that I had started it sooner, before university sometimes, because it did help me. Like, it's really useful in university if you want to become a biologist or a scientist to be able to draw.
Yeah, it's certainly a skill I lack that I think would be really, really handy. It's something I'm trying to get better at now. But sorry. Go on.
I think I'd say, I don't know, 2 or 3 years now that I've had drawing to learn like all the concepts and stuff. That only takes like a little bit of time, but then practicing them, that takes the most time.
That's the main trick. Yeah, as it always is.
Learning the stuff. I was like, I think I took a course and then it was like done in like 6 weeks. But then I was like, okay, but I don't actually know how to draw. So yeah.
Right, you just have the basics. A couple of other questions. How long would you spend on a basic drawing like the shell?
That's an interesting question. So usually in fieldwork, you're time limited. So it might be just an hour or two where you have to get something down in your book. But if you have no time limits, you can spend like, maybe you can do like the first day you're doing your sketches, and then maybe the next day you come back to it, kind of refine it, keep looking at it. You might discover some new things.
Right.
Yeah, things like that. But if you are in fieldwork, it's just a few hours, because the rest, it's like either you're taking other notes or you're trying to just get everything done.
There's a quantity and a quality trade-off.
Yeah, something like that. So quality takes more time.
Yeah. Next question. How would you introduce nature drawing to students, approximately age 13 or so? Would you have any tips for that?
I think it would be, I don't know, I have never tried to do it, so I think these concepts, the same concepts, but definitely not having the hard, like the vocabulary is hard. So it would be kind of more in practicing your techniques, like for example line weight, like obviously just practicing those, like maybe drawing forms, these kind of things. Like I think it might be more towards the drawing side than the actual scientific side.
Right.
Yeah, because now if you're like older, you kind of start to understand like scientific terminology and stuff and can be able to apply it, but it might be the drawing side, I think, that I would start with first if I was teaching people who are a bit younger.
And I would suggest to someone who's involved in science education that's a good way to get people interested in the science as well. If you're focusing on this section of the flower or this part of the seed, that sort of thing, that can be a really useful way of introducing that.
Because we did dissections in middle school, like when I was around that age. So I think, yeah.
Cool. Do you have any suggestions for moving objects, like birds?
Moving objects. With moving objects, it's more complicated because you have to do gestural sketching, which is like, I think I have the duck slide is actually, if you go back to it. So moving objects, you're not looking at it. You have to train your eye to not look at it like in detail. You gotta see what's passing. So like how the bird is maybe moving its neck, like over there in that duck drawing, or how it's like dipping in into the water or things like that. So you're trying to do more gestural sketches. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm that good at them. There's people who are way better. Like I'm better at like having something that is still in front of me and doing. But I think having something that is moving does give you a more accurate kind of impression of what your object is when you're taking notes. But it's way harder to draw than something that is still. I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
I think so, yeah. Let us know. If not, thank you though. Yes, you did. Okay. Excellent. One last question for now, although if you've got any more, please do drop them in the chat. Do you ever use grids to make your drawings more accurate, or do you prefer a simple bounding box?
Yeah, you can if you're drawing. I think bounding box is enough if you're drawing something that is like a plant, or usually plants or objects that don't have faces or legs or things like that.
Right.
But once you start getting into those kind of objects that are like mammals, if you're drawing mammals or birds, then it is easier. But I honestly think that using shapes has helped me more, but I know that some artists use grids.
Mm-hmm.
I like shapes.
Right.
But yeah.
It's a preference thing.
Yeah, maybe.
That makes
probably
a lot of sense. If you have any other questions, please do drop them in the chat. We've got a little bit more time if you would like to do that. And if you're watching a recording of this, or if you come up with a question in 5-10 minutes time, etc., you can send them to STEM at flinders.edu.au, and they'll get to us. We'll be able to read them. And I also want to highlight, we're going to be doing a part 2 to this. Diana's going to be taking us through a couple of other things next Monday. So please do join us for part 2 then. And if you want to draw something during the week and send it in so that we can talk about it, that would be really, really great. That's going to give us a lot more to talk about.
Please draw something.
Yes, absolutely. I've also got a couple of other webinars coming up. So on Thursday, if you're interested in chemistry, or you know anyone else who is interested in chemistry, please do get them to come to our webinar. We're going to do a student panel. So we've got 3 different chemistry students talking about their experiences. One of them is a second-year undergraduate student, one of them's doing honours, and one of them's in the middle of a PhD. So we have 3 completely different points in their degrees where they can talk about chemistry, pick their brains about anything. That should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, we've got the second part of this workshop next Monday, so please do register for that as well. And then we've got a couple of student experiences and student panels coming up later on as well. So you can take a look at our full list of webinars, and please do register for them, because that way we can send you the updates and the links and all of that. Like I said, if you've got any more questions, please do drop them in the chat. If not, if this is particularly interesting for you, particularly the naturalism, the animal behaviour, all of that sort of thing, the biological aspect, these are the degrees that are particularly relevant to all of those that we have at Flinders, specialisations and majors, so I'd encourage you to check those out. And if you want to get in touch with us about this webinar, about any of our other webinars, about anything else we can do for you, please get in touch with the STEM outreach team at stem@flinders.edu.au. If you're interested in studying at Flinders and you want to talk through your options a little bit more, we have a team called the Prospective Students team. They can do phone appointments that you can book in. They've got an email, askflinders@flinders.edu.au. We've also got a chat function, so you can talk to them that way, which is great as well. If you have any more questions, now's the best time to drop them in the chat. Diana, do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I guess if they do have more questions, they can just email.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, scan at flinders.edu.
Yeah. And I really think those links are fun if you like the videos, the YouTube videos, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to drop those links in the chat right now, and like I said, if you're watching a recording of this, they're going to be in the description. We're going to keep the chat open for another few minutes, so if you want to type in questions, you're welcome to. But other than that, we might turn off the video and the audio now, but we'll hang around in the chat to keep answering questions. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
We hope that was interesting, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday.